Well, good morning again, Connor.
Good morning.
I'm just tightening and making noise here. I don't know why my mic stand is loose.
Yeah, I see other people in podcasters when you actually get to see them, like Joe Rogan and all that kind of stuff, and they move their stuff all the time and you never hear it. I wonder what they do. You never hear them fiddling with their mic, and they're fiddling with it all the time.
They're probably more advanced than I, and they have that all set up on different channels, so they can turn it off.
Buffer it out or something.
Yeah. I'm not that talented.
Oh, it's okay.
I know you can do it, but I remember I spent a good 16 hours trying to learn how to use this thing, and there's a way to actually separate you and my voices into two separate tracks every time we record. And I started stressing and freaking out, so our voices get recorded onto the same track.
Yeah,
and it works.
Hard. It's hard to do that. Even like that video I was talking about last time that we did, which was really cool. I got a really awesome grade for it, by the way. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I couldn't pull the audio. It was just the audio from my phone. I couldn't pull it into the video. I have to do much more research. I was doing it as I was like watching YouTube tutorials as I was doing the video editing. So I was like, oh, how do you do this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's then difficult when you have a separate audio track and video track to make sure that when you make cuts, they're in the same place. Yeah, and that's why I really chose to keep our voices on the same track, because one, there's not really that much of a difference. It works because it's just the two of us, and we're literally 2 feet away from each other.
Yeah.
And it just makes it simpler in editing, because if I'm going to trim something that I said out, now I got to go down to your track and trim that space, and it just becomes cumbersome.
Oh,
and
absolutely. It makes for a long day.
Yes, and I already am not a good editor. I don't know. I do okay, but I know a professional editor could probably edit our podcast in far less time than I. So when we run over to like an hour and a half, and I say I cut it down to an hour 15, an hour 20, that takes me about 3 hours, because I am literally listening to the entire podcast again and going back, and really all I do on editing is I trim out the uhs.
Yeah.
So that there's not too many of them. Yeah. And that takes a very long time, but I'm not a professional. This is just a fun thing that I do, and I think it turns out okay. And,
I think it turns out good.
Yeah. So
I hate to say it, like I love our podcast, but listening to myself is something that kind of makes me cringe.
Yeah, it's really hard. Yeah, it's really hard every week for me to listen to my own voice in doing the editing, and I've kind of gotten used to looking at the wave on the screen. Yeah, and I almost always can pick out where the so or and is.
It's going to come.
and I'm going, yep, need to cut that out. So, in case you all didn't know, we're going to talk about a young man today that came out here during 1852 on the trail. And I'm going to read you a quote, because I couldn't rewrite it. I tried to rewrite it several times, and it's a good quote from OCTA, which is the Oregon California Trails Association. So I thought this was a good way to start our podcast today. For many years, nothing was known of John Hollman other than his tender age of 19 and his home state of Missouri. The inscription on his headstone is barely legible. A state of Nebraska Oregon Trail marker says John Hollman died June 5th, 1852.
Yeah, really sad.
Yeah. So today we're going to learn a little bit about this young man's story on Storytelling on the Plains.
Oh, I was supposed to say that now.
Yeah, I was waiting and you
I'm
did.
sorry. I did not get cues, apparently.
Yeah, big cues that say, I'm Connor.
I'm Connor.
And I'm Irene. And today we're going to learn a little bit about this young man on storytelling on the plains.
After last time, I mean, I still thinking you're Connor.
Yeah,
I'm still trying to figure out who I am.
I accidentally gave my friend an identity crisis. So my intro today, I cut and pasted from the Oregon California Trails Association, which is better known as OCTA. I tried to rewrite it, but, they did it better, so I quoted them. And Connor and I have had many discussions about plagiarism over the last few years, and it's stupid to plagiarize people's stuff. Just quote them, give them credit.
Absolutely.
If they did it better than you, then great, quote them.
Yeah.
It's not that hard to give people credit. So most of what we know today about John Hollman comes from OCTA, and I'm going to quote from them heavily as we go on our little jaunt because they had the most information I could find about this young man. If you drive south from Oshkosh on Nebraska Highway 27 and cross the bridge over the North Platte River, and I think it's literally called the North Platte River Bridge, you should definitely make a right-hand turn onto a county road and travel west about 1/10 of a mile while watching the dust pillow into the air from the back of your vehicle. It's a small detour, but there's a grave on the right side of the road, north to you folks who travel that way, because I ain't a direction person.
I was actually about to ask that.
Yeah. I saw your hands moving which way you're going. And the grave is on the top of a knoll, and this is where John Hollman died on his way west. According to many sources, at least 20,000 people died on the Oregon Trail between 1842 and 1859. There is an average of 10 graves per mile on the trail, which stretches more than 2,000 miles. And, I started thinking about, when you have these facts thrown right out in front of you, there's 10 graves per mile.
Yeah, that's incredible.
But
it kind of makes sense out here because you have like Wee Granny, Rebecca Winters, Holland.
They're stretched out a little bit more than 10 per mile. But you're traveling along the trail, and you see these little crosses and these stone markers and stuff. And what are you thinking? You're like, what did I get myself into with all these graves along the trail? And then I would have to go back and check because I'm not an Oregon Trail expert. But I think it was somewhere just into Wyoming where people just started dumping their stuff. Yeah, okay, we took the family silver. It's too heavy. We don't need it. Chuck it. Oh, we don't need this. Chuck it. And so there was tons of stuff just chucked out along the way because it was too heavy and they needed to lighten their load.
Yeah. They're about to go across the mountains, so that kind of makes sense, or at least through the pass.
Yeah, so I just had that image of what did it really look like on the ground as you're walking through the trail? How close to the trail were these graves? I mean, if you've got 10 every mile, even if they're not too close, they're there. And you probably know that they're there.
And I know that was one of the big things that was here in like Scotts Bluff, the Scotts Bluff Monument, and Rubidoux, the Rubidoux Pass. If you go through the Rubidoux Pass, you will see a lot of basically memorial markers or things etched into the stone of people who died. And they probably died before they got there, and their bodies probably aren't anywhere near there, but they weren't given a grave until they got to here, or at least not a memorial until they got to here.
And out in Rubidoux as well, you got the 5 unmarked graves.
Yes, you do. Yeah, so and that's the other thing is depending on who buried you and how well you were liked or known, you might not get a grave.
Yeah.
you might just have been lucky enough to get buried, or otherwise you're left to the coyotes.
Yep. That's another Nebraska thing. The word is actually coyote. Anyway. No, I like to give people
New
crap on
Yorkers.
that. Yeah. So while there were hundreds who died during their journey through what is now Nebraska, we only have 7 identifiable graves remaining. So even when we did the
That's
story on
crazy.
Wee Granny, we don't have her grave. We have her
That's
story.
right. We don't have her grave.
Yeah, we just know it was about 10 to 15 miles east of Chimney Rock. That's the best we got.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot.
Yeah. So Rebecca Winters and John Hollman are 2 that we have out here.
Yep.
And we still need to do Rebecca. Maybe we should do her soon. Because she
To
keeps...
get to her eventually.
Yeah, she keeps cropping up. I'm like, at some point we'll do her story. While some graves, such as Rebecca Winters, had things such as a bent wagon wheel rim or a stone marker, the majority of graves along the trail were a hastily made wooden or animal bone marker. So you may have seen those coming along on the trail, but they're not going to last.
No.
You know, Rebecca Winters lasted because it was literally a bent wagon wheel that's there, and it's still there. John Hollman was marked with a rock local to the area. His marker survived, and some of the markings remain, which reveal his name and his death of June 1852. So I did go to the Find a Grave website, and someone had something marked that somewhere along the line, I think it was in the 1920s, someone had mentioned, hey, his marker is kind of in crap shape. We should probably preserve it. But I didn't find in the time that I had any information about how that came to be, because I would actually have to go down there, research newspapers, and see if there was an article or something about it. This seemed to be just a story that the person heard from someone else. So I couldn't verify it, but they did preserve the area at some point in time. So I just don't know if it was the 1920s or much later. People on the trail died from a variety of causes. It is not known how Hollman died, but the historical records we have was that 1852 saw a higher number of deaths from cholera in this area that year.
And would you think that was like dirty water? Or
yeah, spoiler alert.
Oh.
Yes.
And I didn't even mean to be ahead there, but no,
Yeah.
I could imagine. Usually, you think of cholera, from what I know of germs, and that usually comes from dirty water.
Yep. So historical records indicate Asiatic cholera to be his likely killer. It spread from New Orleans up the Mississippi River over into Missouri and across the plains that year. Again, it's all, complete speculation that this is what he died from, but it's likely given what we know.
And so he could have gotten it while he was in Missouri and maybe didn't get the effects of it till he was up this far, maybe? I don't know.
I don't know. I thought cholera was more...
you have to be...
It was more like sudden than that, yeah.
Yeah.
And some of the... Yeah, we'll get to it, but...
Because it's interesting, because if you follow the North Platte, doesn't the North Platte come from the Rockies east?
Yeah, it actually starts up in the Rockies and heads east, and then...
So it wouldn't have came from the Mississippi River then, right?
Yes, it could have, because of the way people travel. So
they basically had this contaminated water with them, and they weren't drinking out of the Platte?
I believe the Platte had it in it.
Had it in it?
Yeah, and it was probably just that bad that even though the Platte flows the other way, if you got enough crap in it, it's still going to stay in there.
Well, and another theory, I mean, depending on what people did in the river, if more people were further up the river and doing all their business and going down the rivers, that probably could have contributed to a lot of it.
Yeah, but because, we didn't document things as well in 1852 as we do today, it would take a week at best today to document where, ground zero was.
Sure.
And back then it was just, another dude got sick.
And we knew about germ theory by then, but it still wasn't... wasn't really known exactly how to fight it.
Yeah. So who was this dude? Well, for a long time, no one really knew. But folks at OCTA took an interest and found out a little bit more about this young man who died so young. And I'm grateful to them because all the information that's out there was research done by OCTA, and I'm really happy that they did it. It made my job so much easier. Hollman was born around 1833 in Platteville, Wisconsin. His father, Frederick, immigrated to America from the Duchy of Brunswick in Germany in 1819 and was one of the founders of Vandalia, Illinois, which was the state's first capital.
Interesting.
They moved in 1927 to southwest Wisconsin to live in a lead mining district. From what I gathered from the information I had, like the whole southwest part of Wisconsin was a lead mining district.
Yeah, it makes sense, I suppose.
Yeah, and at the time, the district was part of Michigan. The town of Platteville, Wisconsin, and its county, Grant, would eventually become part of Wisconsin. And John was one of 9 kids born to the couple. And, borders change. Nebraska's borders changed. And we got that bit that we got from Colorado because there was a bunch of rabble-rousers that were in that area. Mm-hmm. And Colorado was sick of dealing with them. So they're like, yeah, you can have that land. They're now your problem. Yeah. So Frederick and his oldest son, Octavius, which is an awesome name.
That is an awesome name. Need to bring back some of those good old names.
Yes. They joined the California Gold Rush in 1849, and they traveled there by sea with a group of other Platteville men, including the sons of Alexander and Eleanor Willard. I thought that was cool. They didn't come across land. They went from Wisconsin and traveled by sea. I don't know how because I wasn't able to track it down, but they didn't go to California by land. I'm guessing they probably went back east, maybe hooked up on the St. Lawrence River up northern New York between Canada and New York, and maybe went down that way around. But they did not walk that route. They returned in 1852, but Alexander Willard, who was 74, wanted to go back and join up with 3 of his sons who stayed in California. So John Hollman joined his brothers Octavius and James and a few other local men on a wagon train that was arranged by the Willards. It should be noted that Willard was one of the last surviving members of the Lewis and Clark expedition, so everybody was probably reassured that he knew what he was doing. So you got some...
Because we knew Lewis and Clark knew what they were doing, right? It's not like they had any help.
Yeah. And I'm just assuming he knew what he was doing because he experienced going over land before. So,
sure.
That's what I meant by that, not by he knew everything.
Oh, yeah. Listen, Lewis and Clark, they definitely didn't know.
No.
So without Sacagawea, I think they would have been quite boned.
Yes. So these folks are probably prominent people in town. I mean, one of the dudes helps find the former capital of Illinois. This guy was with Lewis and Clark.
Yeah.
So it's surprising that, dude's son dies and no one really knows anything about him. But anyway, also in the company were James R. Vineyard, a former Wisconsin state legislator, and his brother William, who helped organize the company. So more prominent people in this group going. While we don't know for sure, it's likely the Hollman brothers were hired hands who worked in the company to earn their way west.
Yeah, and as you said, he was 19, so he was just a kid.
Yep. In the article written by Randall Brown of OCTA, they found the July 28th issue of Platteville American, an article titled The Fate of Many. The story included a letter from 23-year-old Ellen Christina Willard, Alexander's daughter, who also was on this trip. It was dated as Sandy Hill, Platte River, June 5th, 1852, and described the death of her friend, 19-year-old John. So, yeah, they're definitely out here. I mean, we know they were here because his grave, but they had cross through that bit of Nebraska that isn't so sandy. And they're definitely in the sandy part of the state now.
Yeah.
And I am just going to read from the letter that she wrote. Yesterday morning, John was as well to all appearance as any of us. This morning at sunrise, he was a corpse. Yesterday, about 11 o'clock, he was very thirsty and was forced to quench his thirst from a slough of standing water. From that very moment, he began to fail, but he never complained one word. And yeah, I think cholera does hit you that quick.
That would make sense, yeah.
And it took him quickly. Mm-hmm. Last evening, as he came into camp, he staggered when he got off his horse. We went to him. He said he had the diarrhea very bad. Sorry, I don't want to laugh at the poor guy that died from cholera, but the way that she wrote it, he said that he had the diarrhea very bad.
Yeah.
And
poor thing.
I've never had cholera, but I have had the diarrhea really bad. It is not fun. It's kind of horrific, and you're glad when it's over.
Well, and just imagine having it and then riding a horse.
Oh.
I mean, that would just be... Horses already give me a stomach ache most of the time.
Yeah.
You get off of it and just like, ugh.
Yeah, yeah. And she had already noted that he never complained.
No.
He was just sick and he got on with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, he probably knew that at least where they were, you couldn't stop. Mm-hmm. So you either got left behind like Hiram Scott or,
or you keep going like wee Granny till she collapsed and died.
Yeah, pretty much.
We sent for a physician. He was sick and could not come. So I'm guessing physician dude maybe drank the same stuff. I don't know. But he sent medicine with direction for J. Vineyard to administer it. He cramped just like one with the cholera. And I'm assuming he cramped is John. So she recognizes the signs of cholera.
Yeah.
Mother, Lewis Willard, R. Jones, John Atwood, and Potter stood over him all night and until the breath left him, rubbing him with pepper and vinegar. And that just kind of got me, until the breath left him.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a way to describe dying.
I wonder why pepper and vinegar?
I don't know.
They're both very, very potent, strong things, maybe to keep you breathing. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Pepper makes me sneeze, and vinegar stinks like all get out. So maybe it was something, you smell it and then you're more aware of things. Maybe it was their form of smelling salts. I need to get a trail expert out here to tell me. This is the saddest part of her letter.
Oh, sad already.
Yeah, I know. It gets sadder, though. He appeared to know that he was going to die from the first, although he never said a word about death. The only words that he said were, "You will not all feel so well by this time tomorrow," and we did not.
Uh-huh.
So, I don't know. I've never been in that position, and I assume I'll only be in it once. If I know that I'm dying, am I going to be a pain in the butt to somebody, or am I just going to get on with it and not bother anyone?
And again, 19 years old, that's a pretty stoic attitude.
Yeah. I mean, he's just a kid, literally. I know there's lots of 19-year-olds out there that think they know everything, but you're just a kid.
Oh, yeah.
You've got so much more, and he didn't get it.
Nope. Very sad.
Yeah. I assure you no one can tell how I felt last evening. I went to him and smoothed his hair for him and let me hand rest on his forehead for a few moments. I paused there because that's literally what she wrote, and it's that style of the 1800s, and today you'd be missing a few words in that sentence.
Sure, yeah.
There was a cold, damp sweat standing on it. He raised his eyes. I shall never forget the expression. It was full of thankfulness and resignation. And that's really hard to read without tears. You know, this is her friend. And as far as we know, it was just a friend, nothing more. But, you know, she slicked his hair back, combed his hair for him, or smoothed it, you know, as best as she could. And tried to make him a little more comfortable. They both knew what was going to happen. And, you know, and he let her hold her hand. And I'm assuming he wasn't talking at this point, but that expression was seared in her brain.
Oh, yeah.
That it was one of thankfulness. He was thankful that she was kind and she was there for him at the end.
And this might have been her first experience.
Yeah, we don't know.
Having someone die, yeah.
I think if anyone ever had a presentiment of death, he had. He was a general favorite. There was not one in our train of 43 in number, but loved him dearly and shed tears at his death. So, you know, he was well liked by everybody in the whole wagon train.
Probably admired as, you know, a spry young youth coming to have this adventure.
Yep.
I'm sure he was, you know, got a lot of people's spirits up.
And, you know, gets thirsty, takes the wrong drink, and a day later he's dead.
It said like stagnant water from a pond.
Yeah.
So that would definitely kill you quickly.
Yeah.
If you didn't boil it, if you didn't have time to clean it in any way.
Yeah.
You were effed.
Yeah. To put it mildly. Yeah. I have just returned from accompanying him to his last resting place. So there was she put a lot of dashes in. So this is still her letter, but she's writing a little later.
Yeah.
He is buried by the roadside on a beautiful eminence. The grave was dug very, very deep by O's request, and O is Octavius, his brother. So the wolves could not dig him up. That hits hard too, because you know, that reminds me again of Rebecca Winters too. They wanted to make sure her grave was deep enough that the wolves and coyotes and whatever else was out here wasn't going to dig her up. And John's brother Octavius was like, yeah, we need to make sure it's deep enough that they're not going to dig it up. They covered the grave with solid rock. His name, age, and place of residence was engraved on a slab for a tombstone. We then covered the grave with sod, ECW, and that's just her initials. A lot of her letter is just matter of fact. This is what happened, but there's a lot of caring and kindness and compassion in her letter too. She just had to help bury her friend who yesterday was chilling out with, you know.
And that's how fast it went.
Yeah.
And there's many, many horrible ways to die out here. I mean, getting bitten by a rattler was a thing too. And if you got bit by a rattlesnake, you probably weren't going to make it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, to watch people be just fine and just have something that quick happen and they're gone. Yeah, it was very common.
Yeah.
Very, very common.
Yeah. So the inscription on his gravestone reads, John Hollman, died June 5th, 1852, age 19 years and 4 months, and then WIS for Wisconsin.
Wisconsin,
yeah. And you can go out and visit it today. You can see his grave. There's a little marker nearby. And I have not been out to his grave. I found this story while I was working on our last episode. I just saw a map of cemeteries in the Oshkosh area, and I thought, oh my gosh, there's a lot of cemeteries there. And then I saw one that said John Hollman grave. Well, you don't single out a single grave unless it's important for some reason. So I started looking, and there's not a lot of information out there. Like I said, the information that was found, researched, and written by OCTA. And, I know this is one of our shorter episodes, but I just wanted to mention before we go out for today, while people think OCTA is just a bunch of nerds, it's also an organized group of individuals trying to preserve history. And this is an important part of our history in America. The work they do is given freely, and it's an invaluable source of information for researchers. I often quote from them in our other podcasts, especially when we're doing something on the trails. Mm-hmm. And I will also use them as a jumping off point to find other things about other things. For instance, Mattis was the most prominent superintendent down at the Scottsbluff National Monument, and he wrote a couple books. And OCTA has an archive of all the stuff that he wrote. And not everything he wrote was on the trails, because he wrote about agate as well and some other places. But they have all that stuff, and I've read it many, many times. So they are great to go to, even if you just use them as a jumping off point. Mm-hmm. Just credit that's where you got it from. I think we sometimes don't realize the value in the hard work and all the time devoted to preserving the information we have from all the overland trails, and presenting it to the public. Because even though OCTA is the Oregon California Trails Association, they also cover the Pony Express, because that pretty much followed the Oregon Trail. But they also have stuff, not as much as the Mormons do, but they have stuff on the Mormon Trail.
Sure.
Just because of its nature, where everything went. And it's all about preserving history. And, you and I talk all the time about getting sponsors for this podcast. And I feel sometimes like I'm selling something. But the fact is, OCTA is cool.
It is.
And I think it's a valuable resource for anyone researching history in this area. And I'm going to shut up. That's my spiel for today.
Before that, I just mentioned, is there any way to donate to them?
Yes, you can go to their website. What is it, octa.org?
Mm-hmm. Which I always encourage people to do when we use this. Donate, if not your time, a little bit of your money goes a long way to help these people.
Yeah. I mean, even $5.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that firsthand in 2004 when the tsunami hit in Indonesia. Mm-hmm. I was visiting my in-laws in England, and when we got on the plane, they had a little bucket to toss your change. So if you've never traveled internationally, you can't change your change back to American money when you come back. The bills you can change, but not the change.
Not the change, yep.
So they were just like, toss your spare change in here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. I had like $2 or $3 in change.
Yeah.
So I dumped it in the bucket. A week later, British Airways had raised something like $35 million. Wow. And a good $6 to $7 million of it was just people's pocket change.
Yeah.
And for me, it was $2 to $3 in change.
Mm-hmm.
And it was nothing to me.
Yeah.
But my nothing added to everybody else's nothing literally added to millions. Mm-hmm. So, even if you have $3, I have on Patreon, I've thought about lowering our thing to $3 from $6, because I know a lot of people like to support folks on Patreon. I support one person and I want to support another person, mm-hmm. and they only ask for $3.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can do that. The other person, I do $5 a month, but it is for a cause that, we're not getting political here. It's for a cause that's very near and dear to my heart, and I'm sure you know immediately what it is. So I give to that. And then the other one is Lollipop Comics on Patreon. This guy does these short little video cartoon bits after every Grand Prix, and they're absolutely hilarious, and I love them. And I mean, I've been following the guy since he started like 3 years ago, and I'm going, why am I not giving him $3 a month?
Yeah.
So places like OCTA, maybe you can only do $3 a month or $3 a year, whatever.
They'll take it.
The work that these folks do allows Connor and I to do research, mm-hmm. to do these podcasts. They've done everything. They've put out the written word. And sometimes, this case with John Hollman, they literally had all the stuff I could find out there about him. But a lot of times they have bits of stuff which will pique my interest, and then I'll go look someplace else and look someplace else. So sometimes they're my jumping off point, sometimes they're my main point, but I can't do what I do without them. And even when I worked at the Star-Herald, I knew the OCTA president, because at the time, she still lives in Gearing, but at the time, she was the president. Yeah. So I could just call her up and ask questions, and I knew the vice president, and that lady has moved away and retired someplace else. But I know that if I couldn't get in touch with them, I had the number for media contacts, which is different from regular people, but I could call them and say, hey, I'm doing a story on this thing. Can you guys point me in the right direction? And they would overwhelm me with information, but it was awesome. Yeah. So,
and I guess, if you're a little bit further south or a little bit further north, the Oregon Trail, I know many, many people from out of the States that just do not either know or really understand the importance of the Oregon Trail, let alone the people who help preserve it. Yeah. But, if you want to, just as important for the Easterners to have the war sites, such whatever, again, not getting in political, however you think about preserving history, it's just as important to us. Yeah. We, even though it's just a trail. Yeah, it goes through our town. I drive on it every day. So
yeah. So that's my spiel for today. It's really sad. John Hollman died on the trail. Yeah. The only thing I can say is I guess I'm glad he went quickly. Because I still feel bad for wee Granny. She was done days before her body gave out, and she just kept getting up and going. In the hopes that she was going to make it, and it was just too far. Yeah. And that's the sad reality of all of the trails out here, regardless of which one you pick to research or learn about. While there were many, many that made it, there were many more that didn't.
And many, even amongst the Lakota, who were natural nomads of this land, they traveled back and forth based on the herds. They lost many, many people every year. Every year. And it's not really well documented or known, but it's very true. That's why we have all the graves and why so much of this land's sacred. There was a lot of people that passed season to season to season. So, it's good to remember all of that.
Yeah, and it's good to remember young men like John Hollman who, like me, had a hope for a better future and came out west. I just got to do it in a plane and a car, and I didn't really worry about dying.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to have parents that sort of just kind of popped me out here.
Oh, God, I can't wait for that phone call from your mom when she hears that. She'll be like, really, Connor, you said that?
Thank you, Mom.
Yeah. We'll get her here one day, and we'll get her to talk. But anyway, that's it for us this time. Hopefully we'll have a much longer episode for you next time. I am starting right now to work on Fort Robinson, which is going to be a multi-part episode.
Amazing.
I'm going to email a couple people I know at Agate and see if they will come down and talk to us. That will be a multi-part episode too. And if I can get all that done sooner rather than later, we'll get that out.
And if you enjoy all the stuff about the Lakota, about the wars, about the soldiers, about mammoths, stay tuned for Fort Robinson.
Yes, it's got all that and more. For now, I'm Irene.
I'm Connor.
And this is Storytelling on the Plains.